Hello and good afternoon. It's good morning for you, but good afternoon for us. Hello everyone watching this recording in our conference in Jerusalem. I'm Ronnie. I'm the co-director of the Heschel Center for Sustainability, and I am honored and pleased to interview today Mayor Mike Savage, the Mayor of Halifax, Nova-Scotia, Canada. Thank you very much for being with us.
Very happy to be with you. Jerusalem is probably the greatest city I've ever been to. It's nice to be with you.
Yes, and from a great city to a great city. Halifax is, from what I know, a port city with a rich history. It's the capital of the province. It has a population of around, I don't know, correct me, 440,000 inhabitants. And also, on top of all these great attributes, has a pretty solid and innovative approach to climate change and the actions that need to be taken around it. The city has won many awards for the assessment and implementation and the participation of the citizens in the efforts around the climate crisis. We appreciate the opportunity to learn from your experience, and thank you very much for giving us your time. So first of all, I would like to know what motivated you personally to join this climate crisis effort and basically prepare a municipal assessment plan for the climate crisis and build a whole very ambitious programs around it.
Okay, there's a lot there. First of all, Halifax is now about 480,000 people. We've been Canada's fastest growing city over the last number of years. A lot of immigration has helped to fuel that growth. So for me, in terms of climate, I've always felt that climate action was necessary, but I wouldn't have ever called myself somebody right out on the front lines on climate. I remember I used to be a member of parliament, and in the election of 2008, our party, the Liberal Party, ran with what they called the green shift, which was a carbon tax, which was probably ahead of its time. And so I saw both the benefits and the detriments of that. But being the mayor of a coastal city now for 11 years, and seeing the impacts of climate, as I talk to you right now, we're watching Hurricane Lee work its way up through places like Puerto Rico towards Florida. It's going to take a northward turn, and we're all watching to see what the impacts will be. Because years ago, these hurricanes died out in the cold weather, but in the cold water, but the water's not as cold anymore. So after last year's storm, Hurricane Fiona, we're now watching with great interest what happens to Lee. So we've had climate plans here for a long time in the city. Long before I became mayor, climate was something that impacted our development plans. And but over the last number of years, we've done a redo of our climate action plan. We have a robust environment and climate change department in the city, which not many years ago was one person, and now it's heading towards 20 people. So we said we need to look at both adaptation and mitigation. And in 2019, we became the second city in Canada to declare a climate emergency, and we started working on a climate action plan, which became known as Halifax, HALIFACT, the ACT being Acting on Climate Together. We introduced that along with some great leadership in our staff, Shannon Miedema and others. And we just recognize that this is an important thing for us to do, and we have to recognize the impact that it's having on our people.
I think what impressed me when I heard you tell this story last year was how involved the citizens were, and those interesting tools you've had in order to empower local businesses, local people to take action and to become part of it. So yeah, if you can tell us about that.
Well, I think an ambitious plan on something like climate can only be successful if it's broad-based in the community. It can't be sort of drawn up by 6 people and then introduced as a fait accompli. So we wanted to prioritize the people in this. So in terms of consultations, I forget the number, but well over 100 organizations and groups we consulted with, and not just folks like the Ecology Action Center, who are activists on climate, but the universities, building owners, also the indigenous populations here in Nova Scotia, the Mi'kmaq, the first people of this land, but also groups like the Social Workers Association of Nova Scotia, as well as Nature Trust. So really of the belief that really good action needs to be rooted in community consultation and discussion and learnings. And so I think, that was really, important. And then finding ways to bring them all together, facilitating that work, was proud of it. So that when this plan was brought to our regional council, there was a lot of endorsers of it because they had seen the work and been part of the work, and it helped to make it happen.
Did you find it difficult? Because when we're doing a lot of work with municipalities here in Israel, and when we try to promote working with citizens, with local powers, with local organizations, there's a bit of a pushback. The people of the municipality said that they're overwhelmed, they're swamped, and it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of time out of their normal work. And I was wondering if you can tell us about how that cooperation worked maybe in Halifax between the professional people of the City Hall and members of the community.
Right. Well, I may have said this when we were in Sharm together, but I understand the workload on cities right now. There's a tremendous burden on local governments. But I think that on something like this, and it's not as if I as mayor went to every one of these groups and sat down. I didn't. We had people who did this for us, and get a good facilitator. But I think you have to understand, not only are you learning from people about what they need in a climate action plan, but you're also explaining what we need in a climate action plan, and finding where the sweet spots are for working together. I mean, the business community, in large part, understand the need for climate action. We're seeing capital around the world is now coalescing around green projects, and people are starting to understand that those cities that embrace green action will do well. There's not a lot of shortcuts on this. I think it does take some time, but I also think that time is running out on something like climate action. We're getting all these warnings from the IPCC and others, that we're not doing enough and we're not doing it fast enough. So I think cities have to listen. They have to take the time, if they can, to listen to community, but you also have to be prepared to make tough decisions and move forward.
You mentioned the local businesses, and another very interesting and important part of the process you are leading is, in order to finance all these investments that you've identified as required for mitigation and adaptation, you've introduced a local municipal tax that is designated for these kind of activities. Talking about taxes always brings the people, gets their systems going. So I would love for you to tell us the story about this tax and how it's being accepted, or how it came about.
Well, you're right. So first of all, cities in Canada, I don't know what the situation is in Israel, but cities in Canada we get virtually all of our tax from property taxes, and which means that you're assessing residential and commercial properties for tax. It's not a progressive form of taxation. It's not the kind of taxation you would do if you started at the bottom up and said, how should we fund projects? You would probably put it on income, like other orders of government do. But it's the system that we have. So we looked at this and we said, in order to finance what we want to do, it's going to cost a lot of money. And just in our transportation, the greening of transportation, electrification of potentially hydrogen of buses, and also here in Nova Scotia and Dartmouth, in Halifax, Dartmouth, the ferry system, the water system, in order to make those, more environmentally sustainable, net zero, and existing buildings, retrofitting buildings, investing in nature-based solutions, we needed to raise a fair bit of money. In Nova Scotia and most of Canada, Municipal governments collect less than 10% of the tax, but we are responsible for 60% of the infrastructure. So we have to go to other orders of government and say we need a bit of a hand. But we got to put, we have to feed the till as well. And so what we said was, we've been a city that had been very stingy on raising taxes over the years. We've tried to keep the tax rate low, recognizing the difficulty people have, but we put a dedicated 3% tax on all properties, residential and commercial. Now, in my time as mayor, I don't think we'd ever gone over 3% in total on tax increase. So that 3% is now baked into our budget beginning in 2022, continuing this year and going forward. And I often tell people it was a plan that was unanimously endorsed by some people. So in other words, some people like it, some don't. That's the nature of government. It's the nature of making decisions. Cost of living is crazy. Cost of fuel is high. Is this the right time to bring in this kind of a levy on taxes? I said, no, it's not. That was 30 years ago. We've missed that one. The next best time we have is now. And so, yeah, it's not an easy decision to make, but it was the right decision to make, I believe. And then people can see exactly where their money is going. So we have a separate fund. The money goes in there, and our capital projects, which are connected to Halifax, to climate action, will be funded out of that fund and hopefully matched by other orders of government.
Your programs also deal and relate to issues of social equality, which is interesting because I think it's a deeper level of understanding of how a climate crisis affects the city. How do you see the relationship between equality and the climate crisis, and how is it expressed in the life of your city in Halifax?
Well, I think, politically, I call myself a passionate, progressive moderate. I'm not somebody who is way out on the wings in politics. I believe in bringing people together around solutions, but I also believe that there are large parts of our municipality, I expect this is true in all parts of the world, who have not benefited from the success of our communities. In our case, it's the Indigenous community of Nova Scotia. It's 4 centuries of African Nova Scotian population in Nova Scotia, as well as people with disabilities and LGBTQSI plus communities, and they haven't been part of the success. So I think one of the roles of government writ large is to recognize that. As a growing city in Halifax, fast growing, outside of City Hall, we have people sleeping in tents because they have no place else to live. So there is this inequity. And when it comes to climate, those who have the least are constantly being hurt the most. Globally, in terms of sub-Saharan Africa and other places in the world, the climate is taking an incredible toll. So I think we have to, the old classic thing about think globally, act locally. We have to, in our own backyard, make sure that we're looking at people who haven't traditionally been part of that success. So we need to listen to those communities. We also need to hire them, make them part of the economic action against climate, and build resilience among all those communities, but also let people see that this is where the opportunities are going to be economically in the time to come. And so I think you have to recognize that there has to be just action as well as action. And we consider equity and social justice in the work that we're doing.
Our conference and the people watching us now is focused on community work, on people that are not necessarily from officially from the government or officially from anybody, but they are passionate about climate and passionate about the environment, and they would like to participate and they would like to influence local government agenda. And I would like to hear from you if you have any advice or a different perspective on how worried citizens and activists can influence the agenda of a local government in a good and constructive way.
So I think the first thing is that we can't go back in time to when we should have done more on climate action. All we can do is go forward. Some steps have been taken, which are positive, but I do think we need to move forward now. And the big issues, what I hear from people who are not really inclined to climate action, they say a couple of things. They say, first of all, right now we need housing. We have a population, we need to build housing, we need to focus on the economy. I think a housing crisis is a terrible thing to waste. As we're building housing now, and we're going to have to do it faster across Canada, and I'm sure in many parts of the world, we can't build stuff that's going to be a burden to future generations. We can't build buildings on floodplains. We can't build buildings which are going to burn. We can't build buildings that are a drain on the environmental resources that we have. It's simply in the wish to do it fast. So I would say to people, like, we need to do this work. The other argument I often hear is, well, China, Russia, India, and all these countries are not doing their thing, and little old Canada is only a tiny part of the world, and Nova Scotia is only a little part of the world, and Halifax is tiny. But you could say that about every issue. You could say it about migration. You can say it about social justice. How do we impact these things? And the way you impact things is the way you can, and you use whatever measures are there for you. And I think making the connection, which we don't have to stretch now to make, between the economy and the environment, and the fact that Joe Biden's IRA is clear indication that there is an economic benefit. It's changing the economy of many countries by their investments in things like climate action. Here in Canada, the federal government has a carbon tax. Is it controversial? Yes, it is controversial, but it is action. And I think we need to promote those parts of it, the success of the economy and the safety of our people. So Halifax is on the very east coast of Canada. We kind of cling by our toenails to the rest of Canada. We jut out into the ocean. We used to be a 2-season disaster city. We used to get hurricanes in the fall, not very often, but more often. And we used to get winter storms in the winter, snow. This year, we had massive wildfires in the spring. 151 homes lost in our city and more in other parts of Nova Scotia. Large parts of our city evacuated, a major threat to the city. And then we had rain. We had 200 mils of rain, 250 mils of rain in July in 4 hours in an area where we would usually get a third of that in a month. These are things that are caused by the changing climate. I mean, all of these things, floods, fires, winds, hurricanes, erratic winter conditions are being impacted by climate, and they're impacting us here. So we can do things that protect us here. I think we all have an obligation to the world to do more to protect us all as well. So I would encourage people to make it an election issue. It needs to be, because there are a few things that are going to impact us more. And we are at a time of competing crises. We had COVID, which was a health crisis. Then it had an economic crisis. We have a social justice crisis. But the one that's been consistent through all of that has been this climate crisis, and it impacts everything else that we do. And so we just can't sit by and let it do its worst.
Thank you very much. It's always a mix. We would like to talk about this issue, but it's a difficult issue. And as you said, it's filled with sad evidence of crisis and people that are suffering. But like you said, I think we can't afford not talk about it and not promote it and not try the best we can to influence decision makers to act on it. So I would like to thank you very much. I hope that the room was inspired by your story and by your initiatives. I wish you the rest of the year that hopefully the winter won't be as bad. Maybe you'll get a glimpse of the advantages of climate change in Canada with more moderate winters. I don't know. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.